Každý příběh má svůj začátek. A ten náš začíná právě tady. Lucy a Selam. Počátky lidského příběhu poprvé v Evropě. Neopakovatelná příležitost setkat se s našimi předky v Národním muzeu. Originály fosilií Lucy a Selam v expozici Lidé a jejich předci. Z Etiopie. Země původu.
I'm a paleoanthropologist, and my job is to define man's position in nature and help us understand what makes us human, says one of our today's guests. The other one says, among other things, that we are all Africans and that the discovery changed our perception of the shape of human family tree. The discovery of Lucy and Selam, our ancestors who lived more than 3 million years ago. For the very first time in history, not only in the Czech Republic, but in the whole Europe, we have the great opportunity to see in the exhibition of National Museum of the Czech Republic the bones. Unique bones. But it's not about the bones themselves. It's about what these bones represent, what these bones can teach us, what we can learn thanks to studying our past and to better understand our future development, progress, and evolution. This is what we will talk today, what makes us human, as well as about those who spent years and years working to help us to understand what was going on. And they did a great job. They changed the world, and nothing less than help us understand our past. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us for the discussion, for the debate that I hope you will be shaping here at National Museum. Good evening to you all. We truly want you to shape the discussion, so on your tables you will find and you can see the QR codes. Just scan the QR code and you can ask any question you want. You can ask both in Czech or in English, whatever you prefer. If you ask in Czech, I will give the translation and you don't have to worry about it at all. I will be checking your questions on my phone, so don't hesitate to ask immediately. I will do my best to you get as many answers as possible for your questions. Here at National Museum. Our today's host, Director General of National Museum, Michal Lukeš, is here with us. Good evening, sir. As well as the man who is co-responsible hugely for our chance to have Lucy and Selam here in Prague in the Czech Republic, Professor Abebov, Director General of Ethiopian Heritage Authority. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. And now, please welcome our two main guests of today's program. Those who spent quite a lot of time in dirt to help us understand our past and humanity itself. Ladies and gentlemen, the discoverers of Selam and Lucy, Zeray Alemseged and Donald Johanson. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's up to you, yeah. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for coming to Prague. And thank you very much for joining us for the discussion. I do believe you have seen them in the exhibition. How did you like it?
Yeah. Excellent, impressive, and really mind-blowing to be here today. Finding those fossils in the desert is something, but to have them in Europe for the first time, and to really share them with the beloved Czech people and visitors is great.
Well, it's an extraordinary exhibit. It's probably one of the best exhibits on human origins I've ever seen. But I wanted to thank all of you for coming tonight. And I think it's an expression of the deep interest of people here in the Czech Republic in trying to understand their origins, where they came from. How did we become in charge of this planet? And I hope we can provide a little insight into that question tonight, and welcome to all of you.
I do believe you enjoyed Selam. You are well familiar with her. What about the rest of the exhibition? How did you enjoy the rest of the exhibition that was prepared by the experts of the National Museum of the Czech Republic? Zeray.
Yes, of course. Lucy and Selam are, of course, the features and the pretext. But when you go to the exhibition, the entire history of humanity, meaning the 8 billion people, are represented in many ways, because the discoveries come not only from Ethiopia, not only from Africa, from everywhere, including from not far from here. Specimens from Czechia are represented towards the end. So I find it holistic, nicely done, and really very inspiring.
Donald, did you learn something new while you were watching the exhibit and, browsing through?
Well, when I had the great privilege of seeing the exhibit before it was opened for the public, I thought as I walked through that perhaps one of the most important messages for people to take away, and a misconception that many people have, is that the evidence for our ancestry, think of the fact that we are a unique creature on this planet, in the solar system, and even perhaps in the universe. But we have the ability to go out and search and find and document the pathway by which we became human. And so many people who do not particularly embrace the idea that we have evolved over all of these millions of years, need to know that it's not just one fossil, it's not two fossils, it's not a fragment of a fossil. There are literally hundreds of thousands of specimens, sometimes only a single tooth, sometimes a nice skeleton like Lucy, or a remarkable Selam. But that this is a rigorous science. It is a science which is maturing all the time with a very objective view, which was all started by Charles Darwin. And I think that when we think about revolutions, different revolutions, of course, happened, but the scientific revolution that Charles Darwin precipitated in 1859 with his Origin of Species book, it changed everybody's idea of where humans came from or how they fit into the natural world. And I think what's important to remember about that is that biology, the biology of life on this planet is the bedrock of who we are and how we understand our place on this planet.
And these bones are helping us tremendously to understand what was in the past and who we are. So what's the significance of these bones to the humankind?
To the
humankind in 2025. What's the significance of these bones?
Well, the significance is that they give us they've opened a window for us into the past. And when Charles Darwin and others in the 19th century predicted that Africa would be the homeland for humanity, there were no fossils. It was easy to say, well, you have a theory, but there's really no evidence. Well, today the evidence is so strong and represented by numerous specimens in this exhibit that you have an opportunity for the first time to see all of this in one place, to understand the connections, and to understand that it wasn't necessarily a straight line. We weren't destined to be, that there were many branches that went extinct. Natural selection works in very unique ways. And they're very meaningful for all of us to see fossils. It's rare for the general public because these fossils are always hidden away in a safe somewhere in a museum and kept for scientists to study. But to see the original specimens is, I think, very emotional. It develops a very deep connection with us.
Were you emotional when you saw the bones in the museum? Very emotional. You personally, because you saw them just a few days ago, actually.
Yes. Yes, and when I walked into the exhibit, I saw the original Lucy bones last August in Ethiopia when I was there. But to see her stretched out like that as an individual, as a person. And I'd never seen Dakika. I've never seen Selam like that. I've seen fragments. Zeray was very generous when he found her because I was one of the first people to see her. And when it was all kind of locked in rock and was just beginning to emerge. But it's the first time I've seen her like this.
Yep.
And seeing her like this changes you, changes your opinion, changes the fact that this is so incredibly important for understanding who we are and how we came to be.
Yeah, if I may, I think Don was right to point to Charles Darwin, who imagined a Victorian man in the 19th century saying our origins will be found in Africa. But think of it for a second. And then guess what? When we go do the research, that's where we actually find the earliest human ancestors. But Darwin did not have all the answers. In fact, he didn't know how evolution worked. So we had to come back to Czechia, Bruno, Gregor Mendel, who helped us understand how actually evolution works. But that was not enough, again, to answer the question of what makes us human. We have to go back, people like me and Don and many others, to Africa and find the hard evidence to really tell the different stages of development so we can tell the story and connect each of us to the past. And by way of doing that, we are also connecting ourselves to the greater biodiversity, which today, you asked, what is the relevance? You know, many of the damages that we do to our planet in terms of global warming and climate change and pollution and all of that is we feel so detached from nature. We feel so unique. But if you really scratch the skin, we're not unique. We are part of the greater biodiversity. So knowing our place in nature is going to dictate our role in nature and how we interact with the environment and other creatures. And I think that is fundamentally important.
What is she to you personally?
Which one?
Your one.
Lucy or Selam? Well, they're just great. I think Selam is first the individual that I had the privilege of all the 8 billion people to be the first person to touch it, along my 3 Ethiopian colleagues, 2 soldiers and a person from the Ministry of Culture by the name Lahun. So to be there, to see her for the first time, in many ways, I'm serving as the ambassador of humanity to go back in time 3 million years ago and see and say, that is a connection. So it's a unique privilege. It's a unique opportunity, but it's a lot of responsibility also. That's why it took not only 5 years to make the discovery, but 15 solid years to get her ready for publications.
But the question that you ask, Selam or Lucy, is particularly important for you personally, because you are in the field also thanks to Lucy. Because after college, you were forced to not follow the path you wanted to follow, which was to be a doctor, a medicine, a medical personnel, a medical professional, and you started to work in the National Museum. And Lucy was just several meters from where you were walking. Is that right?
Yeah, so my encounter with the field of paleoanthropology is a pure serendipity. It was chance. I wanted, like every kid in Ethiopia, wanted to be a doctor. I did not get the grades.
Despite, you broke the rules. At what age did you start to attend school?
Yeah, you needed 4.0 to go to the medical school then. I think I had 3.8, so that was not enough.
And at what age did you start to attend school? Because you broke the rules.
Yeah, that's a new story. So I was born in a small town called Aksum. It's in the northern part of Ethiopia. And I went to school before even registering, just carrying my brother's exercise books. Because in small places like that, everyone knows you. So the teacher said, okay, you can come and stay. And then I continued going to school ever since then. So yeah, I did break the rules, but the teachers were very nice. And so that was probably, I don't know how you found that information. that is probably the interest that I have broadly in education. But the interest that I have in paleoanthropology did not come until much later, even though I was born and sort of grew up in an archaeologically famous town. I had to be assigned to the National Museum of Ethiopia, where people like Don were storing these discoveries, including Lucy. And my first job ever was only 5 meters from Lucy was stored. So I think my presence in that place was inspiring and inspired me to do what I do today. But I should also acknowledge people like Don, who are the pioneers, who led the way and showed us the path. And what we're trying to do now is follow on their footprints. And my really wish is that younger people, be it from Ethiopia, Africa, Czechia, or America, would also follow that path.
But you wanted to be a doctor. And he had one opportunity to work as a doctor. After this opportunity, your wife, Selam, said, he was my hero on that night. It was the night your daughter was born. What happened?
Well, so I've moved a lot.
He knows.
I have moved a lot. And in 2008, I moved from Germany, the Max Planck Institute, to San Francisco. And we were pregnant then. And on September 14th, 2008, at 2 a.m. in the morning, the labor starts. This is my second child. And I called the hospital. They say, well, we can't take you now because it's full. You have to go to Redwood City, which is about 45 minutes drive from San Francisco. So I started driving. And of course, my wife is in labor. My 2.5-year child is with me. And we are completely new to the country. And I'm driving, and we got to the hospital. And then we started walking. And my wife tells me, no, the baby is here. I say, no, she's not here. No, she's here. She's not here. So still, I'm supporting her, my son also. It's now 4:30 a.m. in the morning. One thing that evolution did is that it made us upright walking, which is great because we have free hands. But when you become upright, evolution also was crazy because it made the birth canal very narrow, which is that if you want to give birth, the brain is really too big to go out. That's why we need cesarean sections and things like that. So evolution is great, but sometimes it does crazy things. And that's why you have infant mortality, especially in places where you don't have the medical facilities. So anyway, we're walking. I said, I'm trying to call the hospital. They're trying to find me, but they couldn't. It's a huge parking structure. And I said, okay, honey, are you okay? No, the baby is here. Was it true? Yes. Then by the parking lot, I put the blanket and started delivering the baby. And it was push, baby comes. And then I am now carrying my baby at 4:55 a.m. in the morning with the cord still connected. And my son is watching me saying, Mama, Mama. He's trying to help. And I'm debating whether I go with my teeth to cut the cord or not.
What did you decide?
Just before I do that, an army of doctors and nurses find us 4 people now. We arrived 3, but now we are 4. And then I delivered the baby to them. And they said, good job. I said, well, it should have been the other way around. You should be the one giving it.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the man who found the oldest child in human history and delivered his own.
You clearly have been spying on me.
Let's concentrate on the moment of finding. Let's start with Lucy. It was in 1974. I will set the scene. We are in the field, Donald with Tom. It's hot, 43 degrees. They are tired. They want to go back to the camp. They did enough. And they are walking and walking. And in a moment, Donald is usually looking at the ground because he's always checking if there is something new on the ground. But in one of the moments, he looked over his right shoulder and saw a piece of an elbow.
This always looks so very romantic when you look at it. In a National Geographic magazine, you have beautiful pictures. They think they must be having a wonderful time out there. Well, it's 50 degrees temperature. And you've spent the morning looking for bones that have lain in suspended animation for millions of years, and you're hoping to find something important, and you find nothing. And on the way back to my car, thinking only about the fact that it was 50 degrees and I wanted to have a little swim in the river, because the crocodiles are not very big in that river near our site. And so we're walking along, a student and myself, and I'm always looking at the ground, so I find more coins than anybody else, I think, that I know. And I noticed that there was just a funny little bone that caught my attention. And it looked a little bit like a wrench or something. It had a little notch in it. But I knew it belonged to the arm. And it was, in fact, this little bone right here we call the elbow. And it was tiny, so it certainly wasn't from a large animal, but I kneeled down and I picked it up and I looked at it, and because of all of the dissections and comparative work in osteology that I had done at university, I could see that it wasn't an antelope, that it didn't belong to any sort of carnivore. It didn't belong to a baboon. The anatomy looked very much like the anatomy that was in my own arm. And I said, well, this probably came from a human ancestor, just the thing we're looking for. And as I kneeled down and looked up the slope from which these bones were eroding, I could see ribs, I could see a piece of jaw, I could see part of shards of a skull, and I realized in that moment that here was a childhood dream coming true. That this was part of a skeleton that we knew from the geology was more than 3 million years old, something that had never before been seen. And it would open up a major new window for us to try to understand the shape of the human family tree. And I think I probably said a few things I can't repeat tonight, but it was just astonishing. I mean, I was swept over with emotion. And every time I see her, I remember that precise moment. And lo and behold, of course, she is a new species, a new kind of human, which was given this complicated name, Australopithecus afarensis. She appears to be the last common ancestor to other branches, most of which went extinct, but one which persisted and evolved into ourselves. And I wasn't thinking about 50 degrees temperature at that point. I was thinking about going back to my camp and telling my comrades, my fellow scientists and students, what we had found. And that was an extraordinary moment, driving into camp, knowing that here I was with a secret that they knew nothing about. We celebrated that evening. I was and still am a Beatles fan, of course, and I had a Beatles tape recorder playing a Beatles album, and Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds was playing, and someone suggested we call her Lucy, and I thought, well, I've just gotten my doctorate, you know. I should be naming her some complicated scientific name, not some cute little name. And I didn't pay attention. And in the morning, the students said, are we going back to the Lucy site? You think we'll find more of Lucy's skull? How old do you think Lucy was when she died? And so on. So it began in a tremendous moment of emotion. And you can look for years, decades, and never find something. And my courageous mother, who is now deceased, of course, who immigrated from Sweden in 1920 to the United States, taught me about persistence, taught me about dedication. And here was a young kid who, unfortunately, my dad died when I was 2 years old. I met an anthropologist in my neighborhood. And he was a German anthropologist who studied the origin of the plow, which was not very interesting to me. But he gave me the biggest gift in the world, which was access to a library. We didn't have a library in my house. I didn't know there were that many books in the world, mind, in one man's apartment. And he became my mentor. And perhaps one of the greatest moments in my entire life, I think, was the fact that he never dissuaded me. He said, well, yes, you know, it's very hard to get to Africa, very difficult to get access to these sites, and they're very hard to find, and so on. But the great reward was when I returned to the United States and was able to show him pieces of this skeleton. He was still alive, and he cried.
No.
There are several questions concerning the discovery of Lucy. One of them concerns the celebration. May Karimova is asking, can you tell us how exactly did you celebrate when you found Lucy? It continues, we teach kids in our school every year about Lucy, and they love that you had a party. So, how was the party like?
Well, it wasn't a party like most of us would go to, of course. But even the local tribes people, the Afar people, knew that something very special had been discovered. My students had brought in some beer into camp. I didn't know that they had done this, but it was only alcohol we had. And we had roasted goat that evening, which was wonderful. We didn't have refrigeration, so you buy a dozen goats, and then there are 11, and then there are 10, and then there, and we had an exquisite dinner cooked by our chef, and the music was playing, and people sang along with the music, and it was just one of those anonymous moments. No one else in the world. There was no internet. There was no connection. But here we were, this small group of people, the only people. And here you see some photographs of me. That's her pelvis that's being excavated by me. And there's my student. He's doing all the work, of course. And
I was pointing on the guy who's just, managing.
And that's a much younger and thinner Don Johanson making notes about this discovery. So it was a celebration that was shared by a small group of incredible people, and the Afar people knew that this was something important, and they came and sang and danced for us.
Roman is asking if you believe that Lucy is more famous than Beatles were.
Oh, I don't think she's more famous than the Beatles.
So we'll let the guys have it.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's let have. Yeah, we can give them the first place for now. Zeray, I will set the scene for you discovering Selam with a question. How many times were you shot at?
3 times.
This is the seed. This is the field of Dikika. This is Zeray with an elephant bone. This is not Selam. If you were not to the exhibition, this is not Selam. Don't be surprised when you come there. You would be a little bit disappointed. She was yay high. But the place you decided to dig in was Dikika, a place where nearly nobody was walking there, because it was a war zone, actually. For 100 years, there was fighting quite going on, but you had a hunch that something important will be there. How did you make sure that you were able to work there and not to be killed?
Yes, so this Dikika is across the Awash River from Hadar, so it's not far. Mm-hmm. But at that point, it was occupied by not the Afars that work with Johanson, but by other group. They are the Isas or the Somalis. Unfortunately, sometimes there are conflicts between the two groups, and the shootings happened in that context of being in the crossfires. The problem with it also was access was very difficult. So I was actually the first person to drive a vehicle to Dakika. So we had to make the roads also with the help of the locals. And of course, I needed company of the Ethiopian army or the police to go there. So I'm not necessarily being targeted, but when something wrong happens, danger could happen. So the conflict needs to be contextualized as local. So when the discovery was made, for example, I vividly remember that it was during the Ramadan fasting season. The locals who occupy the area follow the Islam religion. And in the morning, it's a small team, by the way. I don't have students with me. This is a brand new project. I had graduated from the University of Sorbonne in Paris and went back at the age of 29. And now this is a year or two to the field work. I am the only scientist on site, accompanied by a ministry representative, Talahun, and then 2 soldiers and the locals. So during the day, we were surveying the site. At lunchtime, I come from the north. My other Ethiopian colleagues also came from the north. So we didn't observe the fasting season. We are more of a Christian background. But the locals didn't eat. So they said, we're exhausted, we can't follow you. So I said, okay, why don't you guys wait under the shade and we'll continue. And the 4 of us continued. And I remember vividly, by around 5 p.m. is when the lion spotted the cheekbone, this part of the bone. And then looking at it, I was in denial. I was in denial because, number one, it's impossible that I would find something as complete as Selam. So that's number one was denial. The second one was huge responsibility of making sure that everything is safe. But also, of course, a quite deep joy. I can guarantee you that there was no celebration, there was no party, there was no dancing. In fact, we did not have a tape recorder even, because when you're a young researcher, people don't really take you seriously. Now, when I go, I have 50 people going with me, 10 scientists. But when she was discovered, I was the only scientist. So it's a process which when you think of it now is surreal, but it happened.
You said in the interview for PBS in 2012, quote, "The first week when you are walking in the field, everyone is laughing, smiling, and then as time goes by, you see people becoming more angry and more frustrated. And some of them even started to give up. They said, okay, we are not going to continue. If you want, you can go ahead."
Yeah, they say that. Remember, people who work with Don, the Afars, have a huge experience working with us. In fact, I must say, most of the discoveries that you hear of are found by these local people.
Yes.
Many of them.
Yeah.
But then the people who are working with me, the ethos, had no experience whatsoever working with a paleoanthropologist. So the first day we went, and I'm just roaming the landscape in the middle of the heat and barren desert area. They would keep asking me, what are you looking for? I'll tell them I'm looking for something like this. I would pick up a fossil, and then I'll show them. And then they would go find, this is highly fossiliferous. When you walk on this desert, barren environment today, you're walking on remains of crocodiles, hippopotamus, monkeys, antelopes, all animals in the middle of the desert, clearly telling us the conditions were very different. So they would pick up a bone. They will ask me, this is what you're looking for. No, that is an elephant. This is what no, that's a hippo. And then carnivores. So one of them told me, listen, if you're looking for humans, they were so scared of the elephants, the carnivores, they're going somewhere else. You are in the wrong place, for God's sake. And you're getting, well, I'm of course black, but they see that I'm tanning. They say, you're also getting darker and darker. I think you should go back home before you get sick. That was the advice. But then the process continued, of course. Yeah, so they had no experience working with people like Don or me. So it was complete. They suspected. In fact, I found a fragment of a tooth one day I was excited in that moment. They thought I had found gold, but it was just a fragment of tooth. So that was a lesson for me. So when Selam was discovered, I did not say anything. I just wrapped her with toilet papers and then put it in a bag and went back to the museum in Addis, deposited, and came back with more people.
Yeah, toilet paper. That gets us on a flight in 1980 from the United States of America to Ethiopia. Donald Johanson is on board with a suitcase. What is in the suitcase, Don?
Well, Lucy's bones were in the suitcase. I had 2 suitcases on board. And I didn't want to check them because, you know, sometimes they get lost. And I wanted them by my side. And they were wrapped in toilet paper. Toilet paper is a great way to cushion these fossils so that they don't break. Today they're stored in a very special kind of foam that protects them. But one of the, my goodness, I'm the one on the right there. You recognize the long sideburns. These bones are very delicate. And you don't want them to be damaged in any way. They've been in these sediments for 3.2 or 3.3 million years. And it's our responsibility, the responsibility of Zeray and myself and others who are active fossil hunters to look after these bones in a very responsible way. But what I found, what was so interesting, and Zeray touched on this, that many people think you just go out there and it says, dig here. Well, it doesn't. And it takes enormous amount of experience and persistence and not giving up. And one sees this trait in all peoples. The Afar people, who are nomadic tribesmen, are Muslim. And we had a couple of collectors who were exceptional. And why were they so good? They would sit with me in the afternoons when I'm cataloging these fossils, and they would carefully look at these fossils, and even though we couldn't speak the same language, I would point out certain sorts of features. And one of those people became our champion fossil finder. And so it's a matter of education. And I think it's something that is so important for all of us to remember, that there are very few problems on this planet that cannot be solved without education. And I think education is so incredibly powerful. And as you all know from reading the news, that there's not so much enthusiasm in our country, unfortunately, for education. And I think that we must strive very hard. Both Zeray and I have been teachers and professors, and it is so incredibly important to put education first.
There are several questions concerning what is happening after you make the discovery. How long does it take to make sure that all the bones are completely out of the dirt and ready to be surveyed and to be explored?
Yeah, so discoveries come in all forms and shapes. Sometimes you can find a pristine, clean bone that you can describe immediately. The challenge I had in the case of Selam was that the upper part of the skeleton, meaning the head, the jaws, the torso, the ribs, the shoulder blade, the clavicle, which is the collarbone, even the Alemseged, the hyoid bone, are encased in a block of sandstone, which has been endured for over 3 million years. So in most cases, the bones are so fragmentary, the challenge is to put them back. The challenge I had was just the opposite. I had to go grain by grain and remove the sands, and literally grain by grain under the microscope, and remove and clean so we can have access to those fragile bones.
It took
first 6 years, but total of 15 years. There is no shortcut. So the first order of things is, of course, work with the National Museum, people like Professor Ababao, and ensure that the conservation work is done right. Because These objects are, yes, of course, scientific objects, but they're also iconic specimens that are of relevance to promoting the nations they're from. So number one is go, take your time as long as it takes. So for 6 years, I didn't say anything. There was no news, there was no announcement. In 2006 is when we published the first results on the cover page of Nature and on the cover page of National Geographic. At that point, both CNN and BBC sent special envoy to Addis Ababa for the press release. That's how big deal it was. And that's actually when the name Selam was also proposed, because, as I said, there was no celebration when she was found. And at that press release audience, I asked, okay, well, we have a child here. At that point, we thought she was 3 years old. Now it's different, and I can explain that. And I told them to give her a name that would represent peace, given the conflict. That would be an Ethiopian name, that would be short, and that would be easy to pronounce. And someone said Selam. Another person said Selamawit, which happens to be the name of our minister, actually. But she was not there yet. But then Selam was chosen because it was short. And ever since, the name has been linked to the specimen. We also call her the Dakika child because she was found at Dakika. And some people also called her Lucy's child because, well, of course, Selam lived 150,000 years before Lucy. But if Lucy was to have a child, I think it would be something like Selam. So the official name is Selam now, but calling her the Dakika child is also fine. So the process is lengthy. But it doesn't stop just with publishing that paper. To publish a second paper, again on the cover page of Science, which is one of the prestigious journals of science, it took 15 years. But to do that, we had to go scan her using CT scanning technologies and synchrotron technology. I'll just give one example as to why we did that. With the synchrotron technology, you can scan, you do scanning when you go to hospital, dip into the mouth, go to the teeth, and count the daily growth lines as your teeth develop. And those are circadian events. They happen every day. So we were able to count the days, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and determine the exact age at death, which is now 2 years and 4 months and a few days. So for such an ancient bone, using this ultra-recent modern technologies, we can know at what age an individual died 3.3 million years ago. So what comes after the discovery is the hard labor work of preparing them, but also employing this novel and sophisticated technologies to these ancient bones.
You love to do the research, but you love to be also in the field. You still want to be in the dirt, literally in the dirt. We tried to contact Donald Johanson last year. We were not able to contact him because he was on an expedition in Africa. So he let us know that he came back and he's back on his email. And you want to do it with your hands. You want to be on the ground. Is that right?
Yeah, there is no shortcut.
Yeah.
And I think Don was right. What our job is not about the eureka moment where that finding happens and you're happy and singing and running. That's not how this business is done. Unless, and this is important for the young people actually, unless you believe in the process, the events will not happen. When Don went in the 70s, I don't think he was thinking of finding Lucy and the complete skeleton. And when I went there in 2000, I cannot even think of finding something which is older and more complete than Lucy. That's just impossible. But the eureka moments are basically a trigger for us to shift the discussion. But the process is really what matters, and that's why the dirt and the microscopes and the technologies are really fundamental. So what we do is about the past. The bones that we work on are old, but the science that we apply today are really cutting edge and very sophisticated.
We have a lot of questions about the life of Lucy and Selam. And I would love you to introduce them, but in a little bit of different way. Let's imagine that these people are HR people, and they are here to decide whether they hire you or not. And you are Lucy, and you are Selam. Let's pretend that it's not child labor, yeah? And you need to introduce yourself, to point everything good and bad about you, so you are hired. Lucy, what would you say?
Well, I would say that I'm very good at finding fruit and having a varied vegetarian diet and being upright on two legs. I have to admit that I'm not very fast, so it's hard to outrun the carnivores who might like to have me for breakfast. But I'm happy to live in a group and to cooperate with others. Cooperation is so vitally important for the survival even today that I'm very happy to live in a group of other Australopithecus afarensis. I wouldn't know I was that name, but with other members of my species, and that I could be counted on to cooperate with those people, to look after the infants, to assure that our genes would go on to subsequent generations, and that I knew that there were certain other kinds of food that were real delicacies, like turtle eggs, which are round, and in the same layer where Lucy was found, there are turtle eggs. And I knew there were eggs that looked like the ones in our refrigerators, which are egg-like and were from crocodiles. So I would know where to find those kinds of foods, and to care for offspring. I'm pretty good about, looking after my offspring and bringing them up as knowledgeable humans, although much more primitive than today's humans. And I would say that I was a pretty good nest builder in the trees for sleeping at night. After all, I'm only about 1 meter tall. There are large carnivores at night. I'm good at climbing trees and good at establishing nests, and very good at getting termites out of termite mounds like chimpanzees, so we could have some nice protein in our diets. And I'm very knowledgeable about the world I live in. I know where I should go. I know where I shouldn't go because of experience. And I know that I can rely on other individuals to look after my safety just as I would looking after their safety. So I think you should hire me.
Hired. You're hired. I think he's hired.
Yeah, I just received a message from one of the HR people saying, to me, Lucy is hired and getting extra bonus. So, Selam, one spot, it was secured by Lucy. What do you offer to the company?
Well, I'm Selam. I am a little girl and belong to the Lucy species. Maybe Lucy, she's famous, but there are things that she didn't tell you about things. Grown-ups love to talk about their own. We children also have to have a say, because what you don't find from the adult skeletons is that something that I can offer. Selam, my name, I'm also known as a Dakika child. And what I will offer is knowledge that is really unique about how children live, how they cope up with the dangerous world of carnivores. Yes, I made a little mistake when I died, but the information that you're going to get from me is worthless.
Yes, the death puts you in a disadvantage, yeah.
So anyway, yeah, so representing my species children, I'm here to offer unique knowledge about our past, especially knowledge that is so precious because we don't get to be preserved like the adults. please hire me. At least I'm a baby, so.
I did
I'm
not
fired.
expect that. I will have to wait for the decision of the HR people, you know. I'm just the facilitator.
No,
the
I'm not
mediator.
hired, so that's fine.
There is one question asking, if you had the possibility and Lucy and Selam would understand you, they would be able to speak English and they would understand English. What would you ask them? What would you ask Lucy?
I would ask them, but they wouldn't be able to answer because they didn't have language.
Imagine that they do.
So I would observe them, and I would be uncertain what the interaction would be because they're certainly much more, in a broad sense, primitive than we are and unaccustomed to another kind of human being around. But I would like to observe them and to see how they lived day to day. And I would ask them really what their biggest fear was and how they felt about living in that particular environment and what they thought was the most secure place to be, to live, and what animals they feared the most, and whether they lived in larger troops or smaller troops. I think they lived in multi-male, multi-female troops. And I would ask them if they had any sense of the future. Because I think that that's something that we have as human beings. We have a very good sense of the past, and we have a very good sense of the future. We all think about the future. We think about where we're going as individuals. I sometimes, as I've said several times during this wonderful visit to Prague, that I see that we as modern humans are very interested in ourselves. We're very egotistical. I sometimes call us homo egocentricus. We spend, it's true, think of yourselves. You spend most of the time thinking about yourselves. We live in a very limited time, which is 5 generations. Our generation is, of course, the one we focus on the most. Parents, grandparents, children, and grandchildren. And I would be very interested in knowing what strategies they might want to improve, to undertake for a profitable and a rewarding future.
What would you ask Selam?
Yeah, actually, this is a serious question because when we see next to them in the National Museum of Ethiopia, we're really asking questions. I mean, so
They are just not answering.
Well, they are actually, because we know, thanks to their bones, for example, they were upright walking. So they're telling us we walked on 2 legs, but the upper part of the body is saying, oh, we also did climb. And don't mention speech. The bone that we found in Selam actually can help you surmise if they had speech or not. And I don't think they had speech. I think if Selam was to cry out for her mom, she would have sounded more like a chimpanzee than a human does.
Could you show us?
How
do you imagine that?
I think if to think of chimpanzees calling each other, I'm not good at imitating, so I'm not going to embarrass myself again. Maybe Dawn can do it. Yeah. There you go.
What do you say, Selam? What did you say, Selam? That's calling mom?
Yes.
You see?
Or does it mean give me the egg?
Yeah.
So these are serious questions.
Yeah.
So, for example, the lower leg, including the foot, is clearly adapted for upright walking. But the big toe is mobile in the juveniles. So clearly they were also climbing. So questions like that, we are already asking them, they are answering it. But the questions I would ask were more behavioral. So how many sisters did you have? Was your dad around, or did you know or recognize your dad in the community? Was there a one male, multi-female, or multi-male, multi-female relationship? Questions that we try to answer, but we don't have access because these are complex behavioral questions. But one thing that Selam gave us is because the brain is fully preserved, of course, not the brain itself, but the sandstone impression of the brain, as you can see it in the picture, we can measure how big the brain was. We also know exactly, as I said, how old she was when she died. It's 2.5-ish. So what we can ask is, if the brain was still growing, it's more human-like. Chimpanzees, by the age of 3, they have pretty much completed the brain growth. That's why they can cope up with the environment. So we do ask those serious questions, behavior also, and what we learned from Selam is indeed some incipient or rudimentary form of childhood existed 3.5 million years ago. So my questions would be geared towards behavior that is really difficult to seize because the morphology tells us about biomechanics, function, and other aspects of their biology.
Yirik is asking, how can you use just the fossils and find out that Lucy was a vegetarian?
How did we find that out? Well, for example, if you look at her teeth, which are well preserved, you can see scratches and various vegetation that has obviously left those scratches on the teeth. And they aren't teeth like, if you look into your dog's mouth, they're shearing teeth. These are teeth for crushing and grinding. And you don't see a lot of broken bones of animals that would suggest that they were eating meat. So the absence of those means that predominantly they were vegetarians, like most primates are. And it's only until later in human evolution that you begin to incorporate significant amounts of meat into the diet because of cooperative hunting and tools to process that meat. And we don't see any good evidence for that. There are inklings that they may have been using some sorts of stone tools, but the evidence is not enormous. But and once they began incorporating meat in their diet, if you go 2 million years ago and look at sites like Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, you see that all the bones are just broken open. All the animal bones, all the animals that they were eating, that their bones are being processed on a regular basis for bone marrow, and there are associated enormous number of stone tools that are being used to cut the meat off of the bones, and you see in the bones themselves, you see lots of cut marks that were made by these stones. So, and Lucy would have been, I think, very much more like chimpanzees and gorillas that are essentially vegetarians. And while there are cut marks on 1 or 2 bones, we have not found any stone tools really in association, but there are indications from other sites in northern Kenya that they're using large rocks to break open bones. And it's tantalizing to think about how tool making came about. It may have been one of those genius moments, one of those great aha moments when they were breaking open something else with a rock. And a piece of stone came off and cut their finger, and they realized, aha, this can be used to cut into flesh. And maybe that was the origins of stone tool making. But so that's essentially, we know that the gut system, the distance between the lower part of the rib cage and the hip was fairly large, so maybe they had a large gut system. It takes a lot of digestive dedication to digest these sorts of foods. And only later do we see those areas getting smaller, indicating that they're eating things like meat, which is much easier to digest.
When Donald Johanson is speaking about these, you are listening to true expert. Because his dissertation work, his PhD, was gained thanks to 444 pages of work about teeth of chimpanzees.
Yeah.
So this guy saw more teeth than majority of dentists in this country.
Yeah, and if you have trouble sleeping, I can send you this 444-page,
Yeah.
very boring thesis.
I think that diet, this is really, because you are what you eat, ultimately, and I sort of agree with what Don said largely. I think these creatures were dependent on plant resources, fruits, leaves, and maybe stored organs in the roots, etc. But I do slightly differ in terms of the meat consumption. I think it was not the mainstream diet, but they, I think, sporadically exploited meat resources, as we said it from Dakika and from Turkana also. But it was a sporadic behavior. You know, a behavior does not just appear and then be part of your repertoire. It takes time. But so I think that is something that is ongoing, and more discoveries will illustrate that. But there is this new technology called stable isotope studies. You can now, in terms of eating leaves and fruits, not only are you able to say they were vegetarian, you can actually determine whether dependent on grass-based diet or fruits and leaves from the trees. This technology is based on the carbon stable isotopes that it helps you understand whether they were eating more grass or more tree-based diet. So we have the tools to sort of understand their diet as well.
There's one question that is precisely for you. I do believe that the lady or the man who was asking is not aware of that, but this one is precisely for you. What can we learn from the comparison of the development of brain of Selam and of the brain of current children, of the modern children? And how can we compare that and use that to understand the development of our children and their brains and the difference between the development of brains of primates? This question is for you.
It is.
Because you do research on your kids.
Yeah. And we have, we do have a great paper specifically on this topic. So to just paint the landscape first, if you took chimpanzees and humans, the brain in humans developed slowly. That's why many of you may have children. Your children are dependent on you when they're born, like when I delivered my baby at the parking lot. She was literally helpless. If you saw an antelope being born, they're born and they start running. I cannot do that to my daughter, of course. I didn't do it. And she's actually up and running now. She's 16. Chimpanzees are not as mature as an antelope, but they're not as fragile and as immature and as helpless as human beings when they are born. So, by about age 3, humans, you and I, are still growing our brain because maybe 60%, only 60% of the adult side is formed. In chimpanzees, over 90% is formed, meaning they are already ready to forage, to continue find their own food. Humans don't find their food until age 6 in traditional societies, 18 in maybe longer sometimes. So when your child decides to stay at home after 25 or even 30, don't blame them. It's evolution that is doing it. So we are a very extremely dependent species. But that dependence also gives us the opportunity to develop our cognitive skills. So what Selam taught us is therefore that rudimentary childhood, the fact that humans are more dependent than any other species on the planet, started 3.5 million years ago because we see Selam's brain is still growing at the age of 2.5, whereas if it was a chimpanzee, it would have been over 90% complete. So that question is really pertinent and was specifically addressed thanks to the skeleton of Selam.
What do you think is the probability of someone in this room today being directly related to Lucy?
Well, I think we're all related to Lucy.
Is that right?
I mean, we didn't make a jump from Australopithecus afarensis to Homo sapiens. There were many intermediate species along the way, but certainly the common conception, I think, within the field of what is called paleoanthropology, it's not the study of old anthropologists, but the study of human origins, of paleoanthropology is to understand when our genus arose. Australopithecus, and Zeray has published a brilliant paper summing up all the information in multitude of aspects of what makes you an Australopithecus, and conversely, we have to entertain the idea of what makes us in the genus Homo. And it appears that Lucy and Selam's species, Afarensis, was the last common ancestor to lineages of other Australopithecus that died out because they were restricted in terms of their adaptability to climatic change. And the other branch began to incorporate different strategies, different kinds of diets, probably the very early glimmerings of the development and use of stone tools to procure a new, very high energy source of food. And being a vegetarian, you don't see cows and standing up and sitting up and rolling over or whatever. Doesn't take much intelligence as a herbivore like a cow to run down a blade of grass. But if you're going to start eating meat, you have to have a very specific strategy to understanding their behavior, understanding the strategy of how to hunt these animals, and so on. But it really looks like Afarensis gave rise to our own genus. The evidence is not as strong as we'd like to see it, but shortly after the disappearance of Lucy's species and Dakika's species, we see the glimmerings of the genus Homo. So that would have led to other various species that would ultimately connect us. Mm-hmm. So while we're not, it didn't happen in one instant in evolutionary time, it happened over probably 3 million years. And so it means that we are all related to one another. I'm sure we'll talk about this, but the work that we have done in terms of what is the largest contribution that our work has contributed is the fact that we are, every one of us in this room, an African. Our origins are totally African. And no matter the color of our skin or shape of eye or whatever, our roots all lead back to Africa, and we are united by our past. And I think that's a very important philosophical point of view, that if we're united by our past, we probably are looking at a united future, which isn't looking so good these days. But I think that these are questions that we ask about our fossils. There are social cultural anthropologists who think that once culture took over our lives, biology was no longer of any importance. But biology is what really made us available to become human, and we are united by that past. And I think it's extremely important for us to understand that we are not beyond biology, that we cannot count on culture to solve every problem, that nature, Mother Nature, will take its own course. And what is happening to the planet today and the misuse of many of the resources that are necessary for us to survive into the future are in great danger. So we are united by this past. Africa was the cradle that really formed us, and it's very important to remember that we are all united. And in fact, in many ways, it means that we should appreciate each other, I think, much better than we do.
I think I may add. Good job. this is really a very important question because there is sometimes misconceptions. As Don always says, we are all Africans. True. But when we say we are all Africans, it's not suggesting that today's Africans have the monopoly of that heritage. Don and I and Daniel and all of you are equidistant to Lucy. We are the same distance. Why? Because the Lucy species lived between 4 and 3 million years ago, giving rise to the genus Homo. Now we are still Homo now. And then the genus Homo ultimately gave to the species Homo sapiens. We are still together, all of us. And then Homo sapiens started living Africa, once formed in Africa, and then going to different parts of the world. They were in Asia by 50,000 years ago. That is a species that we call Homo sapiens today. They were in Europe about 45,000 years ago, not far from here, Viti Kun. They were in the Americas much later, after 15,000 years ago. So that early origin that pertains to Selam and Lucy is shared by you and I equidistant, number one. The first Homo, equidistant. The very few differences that you see in terms of our skin color and hair, height and all of that are really not older than 20, 30, 50,000 years ago.
Which is nothing in the
Which
in
is
the scale
nothing
of
in the
evolution.
big scale of things. Yeah. So when we say we are all Africans, a person from Africa and this young man are equally related to Lucy and Selam. And that is really fundamental to underscore today's Africans. Yes, they own the heritage, but they do not have monopoly of that heritage. Genetically or morphologically speaking, we are all linked in the same manner.
And that's why we are tied for the future as well. Donald, what was on the bumper sticker you had on your car when you were living at Berkeley? What was written there on the bumper sticker?
Well, one of the bumper stickers was, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance.
That was the one I had not in my mind.
But we developed a website for my institute. And we're pondering the title of this, title for this website. And I chose the title Becoming Human, because I don't think we're quite there yet. And I think we are still a work in progress. And I'm hopeful that with the perspective of time that we have by studying our past and assessing what we're doing now, will help our species live a very long future. So I think that we are, you see, human evolution is very unique because it's a combination of classical biological evolution and cultural evolution. And if we can take on our responsibilities more responsibly, I think the species will have a long future. So I don't think we're quite as human as we could be. And that's why I call it Becoming Human.
Do we know and do we truly understand that the extinction is forever?
Yes, well, that's another interesting point, because even cosmologists, people who study, the universe, which is apparently a very big place.
Been there.
Yeah, but there is this, I can't recall the name of this young man in England who was so popular in terms of...
Brian Cox, maybe?
Well, Brian Cox is one of them, yes. But we live in a galaxy which has hundreds of billions of stars. And one side of the argument is there must be life out there somewhere. And I agree there must be life out there somewhere. But what if there's not intelligent, introspective life? What if our species went extinct? And I think that one of our goals as a species is to bring understanding to the universe, and to bring understanding to who we are, how we got here, and what our responsibilities are. But extinction I call that the grim reaper of evolution. and extinction is forever. Dinosaurs disappeared 66 million years ago, and we haven't seen them around except as birds. They have not re-evolved. And if our species went extinct on this little blue dot, as Carl Sagan called it, on this planet, which is the Goldilocks planet, so unique, just far enough away and just close enough to the sun, and there were no other planet, I think it would be a cold, misunderstood, non-interesting universe.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be human, Zeray?
Well, first, the extinction question, I want to say a few words.
Please.
And that is, extinction is the rule, whether we like it or not. We are mammals, we are large mammals, so we could potentially, based on the paleontological record, live for 2 million years as a species. That's the average. Even if we were better than the Lucy species, they managed to live for 1 million years. Okay, Neanderthals, that we consider primitive, managed to live for 400, 500 years. So the challenge for us is actually not the issue of extinction. Can we at least do better than those so-called primitive species and live in harmony with environment and other creatures? I think that is probably the question that I would like to convey. And then evolution will take care of itself. Going back to what makes us human, it depends at what scale you're asking that question. Because while we talk about the early hominins that emerged and became upright walkers 6 million years ago, that was not the start. We had to be primates first, maybe 70 million years ago. And we had to be mammals first, 270 million years ago, all the way to the origin of life. So it's good to recognize the continuum nature of our survival and our. But what is that makes Homo sapiens unique is maybe the question you're asking me. What makes Homo sapiens unique, in my opinion, in many ways, Don said biology versus culture. I think it's the symbolism, the symbolic species that we are is what probably makes us unique. Because we care about our past. I don't think cats worry where they come from unless you know your cats do that. We care about the invisible. We care about art, music. And I have a lovely dog, but I don't think he cares about all of that. So what makes us unique is probably our symbolic nature, which not only forces us to understand ourselves, but to really go back in time and understand where we come from. And I think using that symbolism to look into the future and live in harmony with nature is what makes us not only human, but better humans.
Helena is asking if you think it's still possible to discover relatives of Lucy or Selam. What do you think?
To discover what?
Relatives.
Relatives of Lucy and Selam.
I didn't get that.
Relatives.
Yeah,
Relatives.
well, maybe I will answer that.
Yeah.
If it's possible to
To
discover.
discover
relatives.
relatives, more versions of Lucy and Selam.
Selam.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people in the field looking for fossils as we speak, I think. And one of our colleagues, Kay Reed, and her team announced just a week and a half ago discovery at a place called Lady Gararu, which is another one of these localities like Hadar and Dakika, fragments of an Australopithecus. They think it's a new species. We're not so certain it's a new species, probably a late surviving Australopithecus afarensis. But there are many new discoveries being made. A colleague of ours, Johannes Haile Selassie, who is now director of the institute I founded, the Institute of Human Origins, has recently found a very important skeleton, or partial skeleton, and a lovely, fairly complete skull that's going to tell us something about perhaps the direct ancestor to afarensis. So the Rift Valley, which culminates in the Afar Triangle, a very major portion of the Rift Valley, still has, I think, many opportunities for discovery. I would say that one of the best places that we've looked is Hadar and Dakika. I think Dakika is going to add enormously to our understanding by other discoveries. But I think there probably will be new techniques that come along that allow us to understand more details of the anatomy and the maturation and so on of these specimens that will enlarge our understanding of Australopithecus. But I'm certain that new discoveries will be made. There are discoveries being made in South Africa, for example, and so I hope I live another 20 years to see some of these discoveries.
20, 50 at least. There is plenty to do, Donald.
There is a lot of promise. We go back every year, as I said, and with permission from these officials here, Ababa, Yilma, and Sahala, we do go back to do museum work. But by the way, I think it's important to underscore, the site of Hadar and Dakika combined have over 400 fossil specimens. It so happens that we focus on Lucy and Selam because they are complete. So yes, every year we're finding something new. In fact, spoiler alert, in a couple of 3 months, if the professor allows me, we will be announcing some new discoveries from Ethiopia. It's still
He's keeping poker face. I'm not really sure that he's okay with that.
But we will be announcing something new. So yes, new discoveries continue. And as I said, that is why the process of discovery is really fundamentally important and really, at the end of the day, more important than the eureka moments.
Actually, Martin Locke is asking about the conditions. In what conditions, muddy volcanic ash, they died that the fossils are so greatly preserved? Because that's closely connected to the field that you have chosen to study. What's the condition there? How come they were so fantastically preserved?
So there were 3 conditions. First, unlike what you see today when you go to Hadar and Dakika, the area was lush, covered with greenery and trees and leaves, lakes and rivers. If I take you there, it's empty, barren, dry, hot. But when you walk, as I was saying earlier, you find remains of crocodiles and hippos that are water-loving and frost-dwelling animals. So that's condition number 1. But that's not enough because there were other places in the planet that had the same condition. The other thing is, of course, the rivers and the lakes were favorable for the preservation of the animals and plants that die. So the preservation is number 2. And number 3 is as Don was saying, the Afar Triangle is a place where you have a lot of active volcanoes and earthquakes bringing out these ancient rocks to the surface. So when you combine the favorable condition for their survival 3 million years ago, the conditions for their preservation, but also bringing out these ancient sediments buried 2, 3, 4, 5 million years ago, makes this combination unique and a paleoanthropological hotspot, paleoanthropological paradise. And that's, I think, the reason why we find these things there.
A lot of our viewers or a lot of our guests are asking how they died. What do we know about how Lucy and Selam died?
How Lucy danced?
How they died.
Or danced. That would be perfect.
How we danced?
We know that you danced a lot.
The cause of death.
My apologies.
I think my wife is sitting in the audience would tell you more about my dancing.
Would you, Robin?
How they died. How they died.
Well,
what kind of dancer is he, Robin? He's awkward dancer. Very earnest in his dancing. Okay.
Well, it's an interesting question.
I do believe that's honestly a good review.
Yes,
that's a good review.
But it's an interesting question about that we would ask. Did Afarensis dance? And that might be a strange question to ask. The evidence would be, I don't know what the evidence would be. But,
yes.
But if we look at our closest living relatives, chimpanzees, they do dance, and when it's raining, they'll go out and break twigs and branches and so on and so forth. But what I wanted to say was that Ethiopia is an extraordinary country in the sense of its own history, but in terms of its prehistory. There is almost 6 million years of time represented in the fossils that have been discovered. So we have things that were very early, very primitive, very small brains, but were upright walking, right on up to the emergence of ourselves, Homo sapiens. So it's a unique field laboratory that we don't have in other places. So Ethiopia has led the research in terms of human paleontology or human origins, and has encouraged that research. There are sophisticated laboratories in Addis Ababa at the National Museum, which welcomes scholars, scientists, students, graduate students, and so on from around the world to come and work in this environment. These fossils are very carefully looked after and protected, and it's a very unusual opportunity for all of us to get a glimpse of the actual fossils like Lucy and Dakika. And we hope that this will not only bring on a better understanding of Ethiopia itself, but how precious these fossils are, and how it's our record of how we came to be. And that is really quite extraordinary.
I need to ask the question once again.
About the what?
How did they die?
How did they die?
Well, Lucy may have been down at the lake, drinking water or collecting, as I said, turtle eggs or crocodile eggs, and a crocodile may have taken her and dragged her into the lake. There's one little puncture mark in her pelvis, but it's a great mystery in most cases. There's a site that was discovered, a locality discovered on a slope like this in 1975, where we have remains of children, infants, young adults, males and females, and obviously that were living in a group. But we don't know why they died. The initial explanation by my late colleague, Maurice Tayeb, who is really the person who recognized the potential of this area way back in the late 60s, and really set off this incredible several decades of discovery. I thought it was a flash flood because even we will sometimes go down to a dry riverbed because we can dig down and get water, for example. But there's geologists, we've had geologists come out, particularly a woman who studies conditions of natural death in these animals, who's at the Smithsonian in Washington, and there's no evidence for a flash flood. It wasn't as if they were sleeping in this riverbed at night and were killed by a flash flood. So it's very unusual. There's one skull in South Africa of a Australopithecus, which has 2 puncture holes in the back of its skull. And those were made at the time of death, we know, because the skull bones have an inner and outer table with a softer, spongier bone in between. And these impressions, or these puncture marks, were made when the bone was still fatty. And the distance between the canines of a leopard's mouth, between its canines, matched that distance exactly. And leopards often take their prey up into the trees, and these trees are around an opening to a subterranean cavity where fossils of all sorts of animals were being collected. So they were certainly preyed upon in some instances, but it's extremely unusual to find something like that.
You talked about the cooperation, the importance of the cooperation. What's the cooperation with Czech experts like? I do believe that we have Professor Alemseged here in the room, as well as Dr. Frank, for example. What's the cooperation with the Czech experts, especially from the National Museum, like?
Well, I think that you mean in terms of paleoanthropology?
Yes. in the
Well,
field that you want to put
I
in?
think this is an incredible opportunity to have this exhibit here in Prague. Both of us are absolutely overwhelmed with this, your National Museum here and the natural history and the people who are running that and who have built that museum. And I think it's going to spur some cooperation between scientists in these museums with people working in Ethiopia.
Zeray?
Yes, of course, the cooperation is a formal relationship between the museums and people like Professor here. And I'm sure they've signed a memorandum of understandings, so we will have to see and how that will unfold going forward. But I think the business that we're in is a business of humanity. I don't think any single citizenship or that country is going to solve the problem of paleoanthropology. So I think collaborating with as many countries and as many people as possible is really fundamental if we are going to answer this question of what makes us human. This question is not Ethiopian, Czech, or American, or Japanese. But because Selam didn't get the job earlier when you asked me.
Actually, she did.
HR. I will at least tell, because I exposed her saying she was dead. I will at least tell you why I think she died. Because as Don was saying, when you look at the skeleton, it's pristine. You don't see any tooth mark. You don't see any erosion on it. So what may have happened is maybe she was taken by a flash flood and drawn and deposited in what we call delta. This is when the river deposits its contents to the lake in a smooth area and will bury right away. So I think the cause of death could be a flash flood or drowning.
Actually, she was hired.
Oh, she was hired, okay.
From the HR people, we received a memo quoting, need to work young to be able to afford anything these days. Yeah. Selam is hired. So, ladies, you are on the payroll. Speaking about the possibilities that you have mentioned, Anna is asking, what tips do you have for early career archaeologists who want to make progress and impact in the field? What would be your piece of advice?
Well, I think in the field of paleoanthropology, about which we are most familiar, it's that a student who would like to undertake, this sort of research needs to really be well grounded in biology of all sorts and well trained in geology. We use geology all the time. And have the stamina and drive to work under these very difficult conditions. Today we try to bring many of our students to the field, and some of them just don't want to work in the field. They want to work in the laboratory. So I think that combining these earth sciences and biological sciences is incredibly important for early paleoanthropology. If they're interested in archaeology at different time periods, they would have to develop different sorts of skills. But I think working in a multidisciplinary environment that is really interdisciplinary is the best preparation for this.
Zeray, how would you justify the importance of anthropological research, such as yours, to the lay society amidst funding shortages in, quote, more important areas of life?
So, can you repeat that?
How to justify, when you are on stage, you are the least informed person in the room, because you can hear the least of everyone. How would you justify, the question is, how would you justify the money that are spent on the paleoanthropological research?
Yep.
When some people would say, oh, we have more pressure, more important issues to study.
I know that very well, yes. First off, the money that's being spent on anthropology and paleoanthropology is just tiny, minuscule. So that must be underscored. That's number one.
Number two, when you want to be a species as Homo sapiens, whose main attribute is being symbolic, understanding music, art, it really goes fundamentally to the question of what makes us human. And how did we become the way we are today? And answering those questions, you can answer it in many ways you want. You can use traditional beliefs, you can have religious explanations, and you can have family stories, narratives, and there is nothing wrong with that. What I would add is there is only one scientific way to understand what makes us human, and that is paleoanthropology, or anthropology broadly, number one. Number two, when we become sophisticated in terms of listening to complex music, going to Mars, and do all sorts of sophisticated things, we feel that we are completely detached from nature. And as we detach ourselves from nature, I think we are expediting that issue of extinction you were referring to earlier. So I think understanding our place in nature is not a luxury, is not esoteric, it's a question of survival.
I will need to get to the closure of this amazing talk with you. There is a question about evolution. What's your favorite fun fact about human evolution?
My favorite fun fact
About human evolution.
about human evolution.
Yes,
Well-
you have others, don't you?
What's that?
You have other fun facts in your sleeve, don't you?
No. Well, I think that what is so remarkable about it is this combination of cultural and biological evolution, and the fact that we evolved from a very ape-like creature relatively recently. And over a relatively short time, I mean, the planet is, 15 million years old, something like that, 15 billion years old.
5 billion, yeah.
4.5 billion years old. Our solar system is 4.5 billion years old. And it only took some 6 billion years to evolve from a very primitive ape-like creature to being in charge of the future of this planet. And I think that's one of the most astonishing observations. Other animals have not evolved that quickly. Other animals have taken much longer periods of time.
So the fun is in the ability to survive.
Yes. So I think it is very important to look at that very powerful combination, that synergy of cultural and biological evolution. And it is something that stands out as quite unique in terms of life on this planet.
Your favorite fun fact about human evolution, what is it?
Well, it's historical. I think it's fact that the discovery called Piltdown in the early 19th century, which actually many people, especially in the British establishment, thought that it was a real discovery. But it was a skull that combined a human skull, cranium, and the jaw of an orangutan. And it was named as a species, Euranthropus. And at that point, Raymond Dart made a discovery in Africa in 1924, published in 1925, Australopithecus, that Donna and I work on now. And the British establishment said no to it. Why? Because what they had in their hand had a big brain. Well, of course, if you are a human, you have to have a big brain, but a jaw that is more ape-like. And it took over 30 years to denounce that and accept the tongue child as a legitimate discovery. So what this shows us is how human bias can impact what we do, but at the same time, how science is so objective that it can rectify itself. So that's why I tell the young people, Don alluded to this, if you want to do paleoanthropologist, anthropology broadly, process, 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 not events. Because events come and go, but the process of making discoveries is what really passionates me.
You know, I would turn the coin over and say, what is sort of the most disastrous thing about evolution?
Humans?
Yeah, well, no. that there's so much reticence, there's so much reservation to accept the idea of evolution. And biology is the unifying structure of understanding all life on this planet. It gets better and better, but the opposition is enormous, particularly in our country and now more so in Great Britain, that people simply do not want to accept the idea that we have evolved from another type of creature. And as I've given talks to an evening like tonight, where I would say, how many of you believe in evolution? Raise your hand. And I think here in the Czech Republic, quite a number of hands would go up.
Would you like to give it a try?
Well, I can't see anybody. So.
Okay.
So
who believes in evolution? Please raise your hand.
So that's pretty darn good. But
guys, you are not sure.
And
the Director General is not sure.
And what I often say is that it surprises people that I do not believe in evolution any more than I believe in gravity. It's a fact. And it affects everything we do in biology. And it is so damaging to think that there are people who are willing to accept that if I let go of this glass, it will always fall to the ground. It is a fact. And evolution is a fact. And evolution is what crafted us. It is what has kept this earth in balance. And it is affecting the way we develop new drugs and so forth and so on. And yet there is such opposition to accepting that simple idea that over time, as Darwin said, things change.
What's the one thing, the final word of today's evening debate, that everyone should keep in mind and understand? The final word, Zeray.
Well, I think it's a moment of celebration for me, for the visitors and for the Czech people, because they have this unique specimens coming from Ethiopia, which we aptly named the land of origins, because there is much more than Lucy and Selam. But as we celebrate, I think it's important to remember the question you asked earlier, what makes us human? And as I said earlier, what makes us human is our symbolic nature, that we are good at imagination, at imagining the invisible in the visible. So therefore, I would say that the public needs to use that unique human attribute to imagine and try to see beyond the invisible and get inspired by the two ladies that we have here before they leave in a couple of months.
Says Zeray Alemseged.
Thank you.
The final word, one thing we should all remember.
Well, I think I've mentioned already and will reiterate that I think it's incredibly vital that we as a species understand that the future of the planet is in our hands. We have to treat this planet in a better way than we are today, and that we are all connected with each other. That the superficial differences that we see, even in behavior and so on, and this is one of the foundations of anthropology in general, that it's called cultural relativism, that just because people in different cultures do things differently doesn't mean that one is better or worse. And that by understanding that we have had this common origin, we understand that the attempts at evolution in Europe died out. Neanderthals died out. They didn't make it. But our early Homo sapiens in Africa gave rise to all of us today. And all of us are related. We all share the same responsibility. And that the evidence for our origins, I mean, what's the first question we always ask as a child? Mommy, where did I come from? We now have a pretty good answer for that. And that answer has a lot of ancillary information, such as the fact that we are all united. We are all 99.9999 whatever percent identical to one another. And that the superficial differences should really disappear. I mean, when you look at the skeletons of people from any place on this planet, they all look identical. They reflect the fact that we really are a single species that should be celebrating our commonality rather than highlighting our differences.
Says Donald Johanson. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you. Thank you very much for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, and your experience with the audience here in Prague as a part of the exhibition of Lucy and Selam, as a part of the exhibition of the National Museum of the Czech Republic. And thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Both.
Yes, thank you all
Cool!
for
Do you know what pivo means?
Prefer, no, but I can
No,
say,
okay, so you just came a couple of days ago. Okay.
but it's dinner time, so I can say brochot.
Dobrochut, yeah, Dobrochut. Both of our great guests agreed to stay for a little bit and sign some cards for you, so we have a memory for today's evening. And I would like to thank you. Thank you very much, not only for coming, not only for being interested in Lucy and Selam and our two main guests, not only being interested in the exhibition of the National Museum of the Czech Republic, but especially being interested in learning and trying to understand. That's the most important thing. Thank you very much.